Friends, welcome to part 3 of our video tutorial on assignment 8. In this video tutorial, I will try to explain what kind of queries you need to generate so that you can partially answer the overreaching question of this assignment, meaning what kind of system one should use for valuing picks within the draft system. So in the previous tutorial, I explained to you the tables, the data that you will use. One thing that you may do with those tables, you may want to specify the relationships among those tables. So if you go to external data, database tools, and you click on relationships, here you will be able to specify them. I didn't show you how to do it here, but there is one thing that is clear. There are 3 tables here. There are 5 tables here. One table, which is coach values, is kind of a standalone table. You don't need to link it to anything. But all the remaining 4 tables, they are linked to each other using the draft number key. Okay, and it's a one-to-one relationship among all those tables. Right, so it's based on draft number. In fact, giving this kind of relationship, one can tell you that all this data can be included within one table. So you don't need to have 4 separate tables for this data. You just can add those attributes, to one single table. But for the sake of clarity and for illustration purposes, all those tables are separated. So yeah, think about the relationships first, because those relationships will come in handy when you do queries. Okay, so let's talk about queries. Now, the first query I will show you is total in league. Now, the output of this query is basically the total points for all players based on the in the league data based on 3 years. Okay, so once again, let's go to this in the league table. So here, for this particular player with the draft number 1, the score of in the league is 3, 1, 2, and 3. For this player, it's 1 because you have 2 zeros and 1. So each player will get a score. But know that this query in the league is based on rounds, not on players. So basically, what you're doing, you're summing up all points based on the presence in the league by each player that was selected in round 1. So the overall score is 56. For round 2, the overall score is 52, round 3, 51, 46, and 35. So as you can see, as you go from round 1 to round 2, the number of years that players spend in total in the league is decreasing. And the decrease seems to be especially dramatic after round 3. After round 3, it drops to 46 and then down to 35. So there's a the most dramatic drop is between round 4 and 5. So roughly speaking, I don't know how you would interpret it, but it tells you that Coach Mike is not way out there. Meaning, it looks like the earlier the pick, the earlier the round, the more valuable players are. Now, this is how the query looks like in the design view. So basically, you're selecting round number field from the table players drafted right here. And this is also your grouping variable. So you're including totals. Here it's activated, and you group by round. Okay, and then this table is linked to in the league table, and here you're using an expression. Now, total years is just a label, and the real expression is sum. You're summing values for year 1, 2, and 3, meaning you're summing scores for each player that is also a part of one particular round. So with all those things, the query will generate you this kind of summary table. Okay. So this is query number 1. Now, query number 2, total starters. Again, very similar logic, but instead of in the league data, in the league points, you're using points for players, points that indicate whether they were in the starting team or not in the 3 years after they were recruited through the draft system. So the output here is similar to what you saw in the previous table. As you go from round 1 to round 5, the total number of points earned by players for being in the starting team is decreasing. Again, the drop is especially dramatic between 4 and 5. You have like 50% decrease in the points earned. Again, if you go to the design view, it's almost identical, but you're just using a different table. Instead of in the league table, you're using starter in the year table. So you're using the same kind of function of sum, and you're grouping by round number. So those are the first 3 queries. Now, In the remaining queries, you're trying to retrieve data that will be used further down the road. It will be used in scoring those players, based on their performance in the league, and that information will be used in validating the value score or the point system for draft picks. So the first query is all stars. Now this is how it looks like. It basically calculates points for each of the player based on whether he was selected in this all-star team or not. So you see Stewart has the maximum points, 3. Pick number 2, I don't remember his name, has 2 points. And the last pick, that was Collins, if you remember, has 0 points based on that. Now this query looks like this. So basically, first of all, you're displaying information about draft number from this table, players drafted, and then in this table, you're just adding the scores for year 1, 2, and 3. So very simple query. Now in the league table, the same thing, but instead of adding scores for each of the players based on the presence in the All-Star team, the scores are based on the presence in the league for the next 3 years. So very similar query. You just have a different table in the league. You're summing for each player the scores for year 1, 2, and 3. And starter is a very similar table. Again, you have a score, combined score for each of those players. And the logic is very similar, but the table is different. The second table is different. You are getting this data from the starter table. And once you do that, you have a score for all of the players. And then you have total points. Okay? So basically, we score players based on their presence in the league for the 3 years after the draft, for their presence or absence in the All-Star team, again in the 3 years following the draft, and also whether they were in the starting team or not for the next 3 years after the draft as well. So they can earn up to 3 points in each area, and in total, since we have 3 dimensions, so 3 scoring areas, so 3 scoring factors, they can earn a maximum of 9 points. So that's what this query does. It sums up. I'll just close, to avoid any confusion, I'll just close everything. So this is what this totals query does. It creates the overall score for each of the players, and the maximum score is 9. Okay. If you look at the design view, you'll see that you're displaying draft number, round number from the same table, players drafted, and then also the player name, because you need this information. And points are calculated by adding points from all-star, starter, and in the league. Okay. By the way, just one note: those things, here, you're referencing queries. Okay. So so you're not referencing tables here. You're referencing output of queries. So basically, this query total points relies on other queries that you generated previously. It's adding points from those other queries for each of the players. Okay. So note that those are not tables; those are queries, and they're used like tables. In this kind of layout. So if you launch total points, you'll see a total point calculated for each of the player, and the maximum is 9. Okay. So as you can see, those queries that we discussed, those 6 queries that we discussed, they don't give you like a full answer to the question of what kind of scoring system you need to use, but they give you some preliminary answers. Like for example, we saw that indeed based on the round summaries, players players in the first round seem to be more valuable, and the same kind of pattern is seen in totals for the rounds for the starting positions, meaning players selected for earlier rounds tend to be starters more often. And then we have some preliminary scoring on the 3 sub-dimensions, or 3 factors, 3 dimensions that we discussed. Whether a player was a starter, whether he was in the league, and whether he was in the all-star team. Okay, so we generated this preliminary information. In the subsequent parts, we will use Excel to analyze this information. So that concludes part 3 of our video presentation. Thank you for listening.